Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, believed that the darkness we ignore in others and in ourselves can quietly ruin our lives. But what if there were certain behaviors that Jung would say we should never, under any circumstances, allow into our lives? Not because we should judge others, but because tolerating these behaviors damages our soul, stunts our growth, and feeds the very chaos we wish to avoid. In this video, we'll uncover the 7 unacceptable behaviors Jung warns us never to tolerate, and why ignoring them can lead to psychological destruction. Carl Jung believed that one of the most dangerous psychological traps we can fall into is allowing ourselves to become the battleground for someone else's unconscious conflicts. When a person refuses to confront their own inner darkness, the part Jung called the shadow, that darkness doesn't disappear. It gets projected onto the world around them. Often it gets projected onto you. This is where manipulation becomes deeply insidious. These people don't just lie or deceive you in ordinary ways, they distort your reality. They convince you that you are the problem. They twist situations, reframe your intentions, and punish you emotionally whenever you try to stand up for yourself. Jung warned us that the most dangerous individuals are not those who are consciously evil, but those who are unconsciously possessed by their shadow. And if you tolerate these people, if you allow them to make you the scapegoat for their internal chaos, you don't just suffer emotionally, you begin to lose your sense of self. Your own shadow becomes buried under layers of confusion, shame, and guilt. You start to believe that your anger is unjustified, your sadness is irrational, and your needs are selfish. This is spiritual manipulation in its most toxic form. Jung would say that allowing this kind of behavior to persist in your life is not compassion. It is self-betrayal. He believed that real healing comes from confronting the shadow honestly, not from being the emotional punching bag of someone who refuses to grow. To protect your mind, your spirit, and your future, Jung's message is clear. Never tolerate people who manipulate you into carrying the burden of their unconscious mind. Jung's entire philosophy centers around the idea of becoming your true self, a process he called individuation. But this journey is rarely supported by the people around us. In fact, the world often resists it. From the moment we're born, society hands us roles: the obedient son, the quiet daughter, the dependable worker, the perfect student. These roles might bring temporary approval, but Jung warned that playing a role at the expense of your inner truth will eventually hollow you out. Some people, often those closest to us, demand that we conform to their expectations. They say things like, "You've changed," or "That's not who you are," not because they care about your well-being, but because your transformation threatens their control. They want you to stay in the version of yourself that's predictable, manageable, and useful to them. But Jung believed that individuality is sacred. He said that the greatest tragedy is the unlived life, the person who dies having never met their true self. When you tolerate people who make you feel guilty for growing, ashamed for dreaming, or selfish for setting boundaries, you're not being loyal, you're being erased. And that erasure doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, in quiet moments where you choose peace over authenticity, harmony over truth. Jung's work urges us to stop betraying ourselves in order to keep others comfortable. The process of individuation is often lonely, misunderstood, and painful, but it is the only path to a meaningful life. You must never tolerate people who ask you to dim your light to make their world feel less threatened. Because if you abandon yourself for others, no one truly wins, not even them. There are people who, whether intentionally or not, latch onto your emotional energy like a parasite. Jung understood this dynamic well. He didn't call them emotional vampires, but he described the phenomenon in psychological terms. These are individuals who are dominated by complexes, autonomous parts of the psyche that operate independently and irrationally. Rather than confronting these inner conflicts, they externalize them, turning every relationship into a drama, every conversation into a crisis, and every problem into your responsibility. You become the therapist, the caretaker, the fixer. But here's the truth: they don't actually want to heal. They want your attention, your time, your empathy, but they reject every opportunity to take ownership of their wounds. In Jungian psychology, these people are stuck in a loop, addicted to their suffering because it gives them identity. And when you remain in their orbit, trying to help, trying to fix, trying to love them into change, you slowly begin to disappear. Jung would say this is not just emotionally exhausting, it is spiritually destructive. You are not meant to carry someone else's pain at the expense of your own wholeness. You are not responsible for rescuing those who have no intention of rescuing themselves. The more you tolerate this behavior, the more you lose contact with your own needs, your own dreams, your own inner voice. And that's exactly what these people, often unconsciously, want. They want your world to revolve around their wounds. Jung teaches us that real growth begins when we let others take responsibility for their own inner lives. Compassion does not mean tolerating endless emotional chaos. It means setting boundaries that protect your peace and trusting that others must walk their own path to healing. Carl Jung had a deep mistrust of false morality and spiritual pretense. To him, the most dangerous people were not those who openly struggled with their flaws, but those who pretended to be pure while secretly hiding a storm of repressed desires, rage, and envy. He believed that when someone wears a mask of righteousness, when they constantly preach, moralize, or position themselves as better than others, they are often trying to conceal the exact opposite within themselves. This is what Jung called the persona, the public face we present to the world. The problem is not the persona itself, but the lie that it is the whole truth. Some individuals become so attached to their virtuous identity that they begin to suppress anything in themselves that doesn't fit it: their anger, their lust, their greed, their jealousy. But these parts don't just go away. They retreat into the shadow, and the longer they remain hidden, the more power they gain. Eventually, this repressed energy leaks out in twisted and destructive ways. Gossip, passive aggression, manipulation, judgment, and even cruelty, all masked in the language of morality. These are the people who destroy others in the name of righteousness, who shame, control, or exile anyone who threatens their fragile self-image. Jung warned us never to tolerate this kind of hypocrisy, not just because it's dishonest, but because it's contagious. When you spend time around someone who constantly pretends to be flawless, you start to doubt yourself. You begin to repress your own imperfections, to feel ashamed of your humanity, to censor your inner world. You start to believe that wholeness means perfection, when in fact Jung said that wholeness means embracing both your light and your darkness. He believed that true spirituality comes from integration, not from pretending to be something you're not. It comes from confronting your flaws honestly, not projecting them onto others. When you tolerate people who hide behind a mask of virtue while secretly acting out their shadow, you feed a dangerous illusion that evil wears horns and good wears a halo. But Jung would say, evil often wears a smile, speaks gently, and calls itself truth. To preserve your own integrity, Jung's advice is to stay away from those who moralize without introspection. Because anyone who claims to have no darkness has simply refused to look within. And those who won't face their own shadow will eventually try to make you carry it for them, under the holy banner of goodness. For Jung, the inner life, the world of dreams, symbols, intuition, emotions, and the unconscious was not just important, it was everything. He believed that the modern world, in its obsession with material success, external validation, and rigid logic, had declared war on the soul. And one of the most destructive things a person can experience, according to Jung, is being in an environment, whether it's a family, a relationship, a workplace, or a society, that teaches them to ignore, suppress, or ridicule their inner life. This suppression doesn't always look aggressive. Sometimes it's subtle. You're told that you're too sensitive, that your dreams are weird, that your intuition is irrational, that your emotions are too much. Over time, these messages sink in, and you begin to distrust your own psyche. You silence your creativity, you suppress your sadness, you hide your curiosity, you begin to live only on the surface, doing what's expected, saying what's safe, and feeling disconnected from yourself. Jung warned that when the inner world is ignored, it doesn't go away, it turns against us. Repressed feelings become anxiety, suppressed creativity becomes depression, ignored dreams become a sense of emptiness that no success can fill. And worst of all, you begin to feel like a stranger to yourself. You wake up one day and realize you've built a life that looks good on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. He believed that the soul speaks in whispers, through dreams, symbols, synchronicities, and subtle nudges of feeling. But if you surround yourself with people or systems that mock those whispers, you'll eventually go deaf to your own truth. That's why Jung implored us, do not tolerate environments that force you to abandon your inner life. Because in trying to belong to the outer world, you will exile your own soul. To Jung, reconnecting with the inner world was not a luxury, it was a necessity, a matter of psychological survival. And if the people around you cannot see the value in that journey, then it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to protect the sacred space within you where truth lives. Because no outer approval, no worldly success, no logical explanation can replace the quiet, powerful guidance of a soul that has not been silenced.